Good evening and welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Once again, I'm your host, Joshua Solomon, and with me as always is the Honorable J.P. Marzullo.
That's it.
Hey.
Don't say anything else.
I happened to come across JP's high school nickname recently, and
but we're not going to talk about it.
But we're not going to. I guess we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah, we're not. We're going to talk about the fact that Detroit beat the Astros in baseball. I don't have to watch the Astros anymore. I'm so sick of them.
How about the Georgia game?
Oh, that's another thing I don't want to talk about.
How about that almost massive comeback?
Well, it's a hell of a game.
Right?
It was.
And then I got to be honest. So I was at Foxwoods this weekend with some family and celebration and what. And I was sitting at a blackjack table, but there was the Georgia game on in front of me.
Fantastic game.
Right?
Yeah.
And with about 2 minutes to go, they got to the point. They were 34-33.
Yep.
And then it was 2 plays later.
Yeah, they scored.
The Crimson Tide, what'd they go, 60 yards, 70 yards?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, I'm in the middle of the casino, and I am screaming at the TV, "You gotta be kidding me!"
Well, and I'm sure your son Sam wasn't happy because he asked me after the last show who I thought would win, and I said, I think Georgia's going to win because you have a new coach with, with the Tide, but I was so wrong with that. But
it was so disappointing. It was you could feel the comeback right there.
It was fun.
Yeah.
And NEC lost by 4 points last Sunday.
Yeah.
The problem was the team we played is in Maine. I think it's Bridgeton Academy or something like that. And they had D1 players on the team. One kid had already signed to go to Florida next year, the kicker. The kicker missed 2 extra points and a field goal. So I guess he may not be going to Florida. We'll send him someplace where it doesn't matter. But
does he get to pull back their offers?
I don't know. But our kids played well. We lost our first string quarterback. Somebody rolled on his ankle. He's in a hard cast now. It's a high ankle sprain. We only have 3 games left because we're not in full schedule yet.
College ball is rough, I think. I think sometimes it's rougher than the NFL because it's the time where you have to prove yourself to the scouts, right?
Yep.
And so you're just playing all out, and you're as hard as you can, and the consequences are, well, it'll ruin your football career. It's just, I think college ball is a rough game, emotionally and physically and everything. So. All right, tonight.
So we got that out of the way.
One more thing. Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades is sponsored by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, the oldest sports shooting club in New Hampshire, wilsonhillpistol.org. We are located at 1732 Lakeshore Road, right here in Manchester. The monthly Wednesday, 7 p.m. membership meeting is today, first Wednesday of the month. So we'll meet you after the show, 1732 Lakeshore Road. And tonight's guest is Mr. Prescott.
Well,
how you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the primary.
Yes, it was good.
So where are we going from here? We got an election coming up. Do we have debates coming up, or what's going on?
Yeah, there's a number of Chamber of Commerces we're going to visit around the state. There's 2 that I know of. And my schedule is getting fuller every day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm planning on speaking to everybody I can, and being on this show is a wonderful opportunity. I wanted to let you know that when I first saw it, I figured, well, it's got to have a veterans type of vibe to it.
Oh yeah. Veterans. We do a lot of veterans shows.
Yeah, we do.
And we do a lot of
it's very
community
important.
Service type shows during the holidays and whatnot.
Right.
So,
Yeah, great. So I wanted to just say that.
So tell us about your background, your family.
I would, because it really did shape me as a young man. I knew that my father worked at the Fort River Shipyard during World War II, and my grandfather served in the Navy in the early 1900s. And I haven't researched whether.
So I have the right hat tonight.
There you go.
Took my Navy hat tonight.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me.
Yeah. And so my father's sister was a daughter of the American Revolution.
Oh, wow.
And she taught me about how she looked back at our history and found our sixth great-grandfather, my sixth great-grandfather, lived in Raymond, New Hampshire. His name was John Prescott. In 1775, he heard the call of freedom, and he went to the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Wow.
He gave his life for this state, for this country, before we even had a constitution or a declaration of independence or even live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils.
Right.
He lived it, and he gave us our freedom. And it's been a real high calling on my part. I never did do anything with veterans or become part of the armed services, but I have dedicated myself to this state. You know, I ran to stop an income tax here in New Hampshire, ran against Maggie Hassan and won in a Democrat district because of an income tax was pending, and served 10 years in our state Senate, balanced the budget, made sure we kept taxes low, and also we were cutting taxes and cutting spending to balance the budget and not increasing taxes. So I'm running now for Congress. Yeah.
You think we can do that there?
It's what is needed. There's a few things that must get done. Number one is we got to get back to energy independence. You look at your kilowatts per hour costs, at least up 30% in the last 4 years. We know that housing's a problem because of runaway inflation. We need to be able to balance a budget, make sure we don't spend money we don't have. That's what's fueling this inflation, and we'll get everything under control when we practice good budgeting. There's an act that was passed in 1974 for budgeting. 12 different appropriations subcommittees. You get in there and you do the hard work of what I did in the state Senate when we balanced budgets. We made sure that we went over every line item, talked about it, without being with fair and fair and just going to the press and saying how the other side is doing. We just worked it together, came to a position where we brought it to the full committee, and brought it to the floor. And that's how you have to do this. You have to stick to the guideline of what they wrote down in our laws. And we're not following our laws. Definitely not.
So you talk about energy independence, and that's a big issue for a lot of candidates, whether it be local, state level candidates or national candidates. Top of the ticket, middle of the ticket, whatever.
Yeah.
One of the things about energy independence that is important is we talk about energy independence.
Yeah.
The other side talks about green and climate and all of that business when it relates to energy, and so they say, coal is bad for the environment, and then they say nuclear is dangerous, and we're using up our oil reserves, and fracking is killing the environment, and pipelines are an eyesore, and all of these things. One of the things that I think folks who go to Washington, our Washington delegates, need to start hammering on is really getting the truth out about each one of these forms of energies. And that is laser focus on things like wind energy. It's great energy, but those giant windmills are made out of fiberglass, they're not recyclable, and they do have an age limit, and the amount of environmental impact they have is much more than the environmental impact on an oil well, from an oil well, right? And so I think my delegates to Washington need to start being laser focused and being able to articulate just exactly how a pipeline is not destroying the environment, especially a buried pipeline, because then you get farmland over it. Right, it's a temporary during construction, and then the environment comes back. You've got the drilling up in Alaska. Everybody's worried about the caribou herd, but ever since the drilling started up there, that caribou herd has tripled in size because the company that's up there is paying attention to the environment and making sure that they're not destroying the environment. They're actually helping the environment and helping the caribou herd. So I think part of energy independence is not just allowing the drilling, allowing the pipeline, opening up the leases on the oil fields out in the waters. All of those things need to happen, but at the same time, you really have to hammer on how this is not the environmental disaster that the liberals want us to think it is.
I think what you also have to say, and I agree with most of what you're saying for sure, that really, when you don't have energy independence here, and making our own energy here, refining our own oil here, it's being refined in a much more, dirty environment outside of America.
Oh yeah, we have the
very
better
stringent
laws.
clean air laws.
We've got OSHA, we've got the EPA, and China doesn't.
Correct. So let's become energy independent. It's going to help our economy.
It's going to help.
That's one of the main
actually going to be cleaner than any of the energy options that we're importing.
Yeah. And really, my opponent, Chris Pappas, stood up 2 years ago and said, I will stand up to the administration whenever they're doing something that's not good for New Hampshire. Well, there's an exact case where you're not standing up enough. We need to speak louder and clearer. It says it's better for the environment that we have our energy independence. Let's bring that back. And that was really all just what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris wanted to do. They wanted to stop that energy independence. And that's not speaking up for what's good for New Hampshire.
He did so with that. In the first month of his administration,
he did.
He stopped it. I mean, bang, pipeline gone.
Yes.
Yep. Executive orders. We need to reverse all of that.
The other thing that interests me is every time I hear Congressman Pappas speak, is he talks about lowering the prices of drugs and medication. I don't see it, from my point of view. But there's certainly, if you have something wrong with you that you need injections and stuff, they have lowered the price for a while. But I don't see that continuing. And he makes it sound like he's the one that did it. And I think where we went wrong as a party was we had no plan if Obamacare went away. Mm-hmm. We had no plan. We talked about it a lot. We said, when I get in there, we're going to get rid of Obamacare and everybody will have better health insurance. But we didn't present a plan at all. So I think one of the things I'm really happy that you're doing, and you've done this your whole career, Russ, and that is you've been a real gentleman in these issues. You haven't spoken negative about them, but unless it's about policy, which is important to do, but you never made it personal, and Pappas is already starting that, which surprised me because I never saw him do that before either. So he's probably worried.
Well, maybe he feels threatened.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, and that's what happens.
Yeah, yeah.
When you talk about tax breaks, right? We are having the largest tax increase coming up next year with the expiration of the Trump tax cuts.
Yep.
We got to make sure that we stand up loud and clear and make those tax cuts permanent. And I call on Chris Pappas to make that vocal so that we have a united front for what's good for New Hampshire. Imagine having an overnight tax increase on every citizen here in the whole of the United States. Yeah. It's not right for our fragile economy, where we're dealing with so many issues. We got to stand up and say, we need lower taxes. I'm afraid that if we don't have strong representation in Washington, D.C., we're going to get somebody that stands by, lets the tax cuts expire, and say it wasn't my fault.
Right.
That's not the way that we should go into 2025.
Exactly.
That's why I'm running for office. I have the backbone to say, we need to make sure we make the tax cuts permanent, and then we look at our budget and reduce the spending that is the wants. We make sure we take care of the needs of our country, but the wants have to be lowered in terms of their expense on the budget.
So I got two questions. First off, when does the expiration take place? Is it taking place like January 1st, in which case the new Congress coming in is not going to have the ability to stop it from expiring, or is it expiring later in the end of the year?
I would think, personally, that whenever it expires in 2025, we have the opportunity to work aggressively to make sure that it doesn't get enacted.
Well, that's where I'm getting at. It's like, the new Congress isn't going to be sworn in until January
21st.
Is it?
Or
No, it's going to be before the president.
Yeah, so somewhere second week in January.
And you have to realize
I'd want you to have the opportunity to get in there, and there's going to be a lot of freshman orientation, all of that stuff, all the hazing that you're going to go through.
Yeah, you can say, because tax day isn't until April of 2026 for the 2025 tax season.
So that's a good point.
So you should be able to get some things in there, even if you have to make it retroactive and all of that. Okay, that's good. So that was my first one. The second one was, I totally lost it.
Well, I got the third one. So we talked about the fact that we got to get energy independence. We talk about taxes.
Yep.
I have two more.
Go ahead.
We talked about the budget.
Right.
The last one is our border.
Right.
We have an administration that's supposed to administer the rules. We have a constitution that says the legislature makes the policies and the administration is supposed to administer that. They call it the executive branch because they're supposed to execute our laws.
Brand new position called border czar.
That's it.
Sounds awesome.
Make sure they get the laws enforced. Our border enforcers, our border patrol, our people in
ICE and stuff,
all of those that say, let us enforce our laws. We could reduce this illegal immigration by 70%. Now, if I've been calling on Chris Pappas now for a year, just enforce our laws. Write a letter, get other congressmen to sign on, enforce our laws at the border. What we have is 2.5 million people every single year coming in over the border illegally. We have another 3 months this next quarter to try and fix that. That's 600,000 people that will probably end up coming in over the border illegally in the next 3 months. We can stop that if we enforce 70% of that, if we enforce our laws. Let's do that, because 600,000 people is half the population of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
We have a very, very bad problem with this illegal immigration, and we need to say it's not the legislators' fault. The legislation's been discussed and talked about. Immigration reform has been always on the plate for Democrat regimes or administrations and Republican administrations. Just enforce those laws. The policies are there. Please get them down. And Chris Pappas, I say it again, please, Chris, start doing your job. You said that you would stand up to that administration of Harris and Biden when they're doing something that's not good for New Hampshire. Certainly it's not good for New Hampshire that we have a sanctuary city just over the border, bringing in drugs. Look at all the drug busts that we've had in recent weeks.
Yeah.
All that is happening is even problems with sex trafficking, and also the trafficking in drugs.
That's a good point.
It is.
We have a law preventing localities from declaring themselves sanctuary cities here in New Hampshire. He just signed it, right? Sununu signed it just recently. Mm-hmm. But, and so, even though it may not be as visible locally, right? I mean, we have homeless, we have, we obviously have some immigrants in our state, but we don't have the type of problems that Massachusetts has or New York has, or because they're being flown into these states. They're not being flown into our states as much. I'm not going to say zero because it's not zero. But the point is, the immigration issues, the illegal alien issues that you're seeing in New York City and Texas and Florida and
Chicago,
Ohio,
Atlanta,
Chicago, all of those things have a direct effect on us, right? Yes. If it's happening in Massachusetts, and you can't say, well, that's Massachusetts' problem. It's not Massachusetts' problem. It's our problem. Yes. It's our problem no matter how far away the state is that's complaining the loudest, right? I mean, you've got a Democrat mayor of New York who's under fire from the Biden administration because he's complaining about their immigration policies. So this affects us all, regardless of whether or not it's not in our state. Mm-hmm. And we have to.
But we do have a border, which people kind of forget about.
And we do have a border.
Yes, we do.
As small as it is.
And they're coming across there. And I haven't heard any Democrats say they are. They've denied it. Oh, that's not true. They're not coming across.
Well, funding has been stopped to the Sheriff's Department. I was talking with Sheriff Macias from the Rockingham County.
Yeah.
He said that the funding has been stopped, so they cannot set up sting operations by being able to purchase drugs to make a sting operation, they're not being funded to be able to have the money to purchase.
Is that federal
drugs.
funding?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, and it's expired, and
you-
it is a problem. Right there is a prime example of why we have to get back to the appropriations process.
Sure.
So we discuss those needs that are so dire for our communities to be safe. We need to be able to make those drug busts and get that drug off the street. And that's something that's not happening because we're always doing these continuing resolutions which just create havoc and strife.
Yeah. So you talk about the budget and what we need versus the wants. Let's go through some of those, right? From my perspective, we are spending a lot of money on foreign aid. Now, I don't want to sound heartless, but we've harped on veterans issues, homeless issues, drug issues, our own border issues on this show for the better part of a decade now. Like, Gary did this show for 11 years. I did it for 5 years with him, and now we're 2 more years into it without Gary, with my great new host. But we send a lot of money overseas. We fund a lot of wars that aren't our wars. And so there are billions of dollars in the budget that are just disappearing. They're coming out of my pocket, it's disappearing, and I'm not seeing it affect American citizens. And so when it comes to those things, foreign aid, funding foreign wars, funding the UN. I mean, what do we pay, like 80% of the UN's budget around the world?
If that's the case, that's the purpose of the appropriations process.
Right.
Find out.
So my question is to you is how do you feel about some of these foreign aid programs? How do you feel about funding the Ukraine war, where you got Zelensky who's using neo-Nazi soldiers to fight Russians, and in the end, what are we getting out of it other than Congress is saving their money laundering operations in the Ukraine?
All right. What we have, right?
I know that's a lot.
I know. What we have is that our fiscal house is collapsing, right? Because just in the last 4 years, our national debt has gone up 50%. 24 million, 36 million, 50% increase. It is going in a direction that will not be sustainable, while we have our veterans who are actually committing suicide in this country is at 22 a day.
Yes.
It is something that we are not paying attention to. 1% of our population is part of our veterans here in America. We need for that 1% to be 100% behind them. And that's not doing our job. Those people have given their heart and their soul to their country, and they're not in a right frame of mind 22 times a day. A day.
Yeah.
It's a problem. So when we talk about being energy independent, when we talk about balancing a budget, when we talk about securing our border, those are the primary things that must be done before we're able to, and taking care of our veterans, it must be done before we do anything else around the world. Or else we will never be the shining light on that hill where people are going to know that, hey, there's a solid country out there that wants to help with peace around the world. We need to work on peace here in our own country first. And at the same time, make those tough decisions that say, all right, what are our wants and what are our needs? We have needs around outside of our borders, absolutely. We have to be very diligent on what amount that we emphasize is mostly here in America. And then while we're doing that, then we can look at around the world. And I do have, like you said, I don't mean to be callous. I have empathy or sympathy for sure that people fighting in their own backyard, they need to be supported. We know that. Right. We have to have some type of empathy for that. However, when we speak about what are our needs, where is our greatest ally outside of America in the Middle East?
I know of only one
Israel.
country on the
Israel.
entire planet who has never wavered from us. Right. Not once.
Right.
Not once.
Yeah.
I mean, even our closest allies, Britain, Australia, even they have started to to a little bit of waffling in the last decade or two. But
Israel hasn't budged.
We must stand
cannot
with
turn our
Israel
back
at
on
all
Israel.
times.
And it irks me to no end that you get President Biden saying, everybody calm down, and then you get 200 missiles coming in from Iran at Israel, and then Biden gets on the phone and begs Netanyahu, begs Bibi to not respond. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? You can't pretend to be tough and then beg to not respond.
Well, his response are,
right.
Don't.
He kept saying, don't.
That's not a negotiating point at all.
But that irks me to no end, and I apologize.
Yeah, and it's really good. It's really, the thing that bothers me the most is that they're looking at other things. The Democratic Party, abortion. What about the fact that these people during the hurricane aren't getting the support they need, and the unions are now protesting? The ports and stuff are protesting. It's the second day, I think, and I saw a thing where there were these people protesting right outside where the houses had just been destroyed from the hurricane, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? How come? And Union Joe probably could stop this in a minute, but he's the only president that's ever stood on
He's got the authority to invoke the Taft.
Yeah.
Taft-Hartley
He's
Act.
the only president that ever stood on the line with union members protesting. That should have told us something right then. And now this will ruin our economy. I mean, this is going to be way worse than COVID was. People are already starting to get a little bit panicky, saying, my God, the shelves are starting to empty already. Well, I don't think we're quite there yet, but it'll be in a week. It will be next time we meet.
It'll be a week or so.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what bugs me is that we elect people to go down here to take care of us, the citizens in this country. I don't care what party you are. I want you to be successful for us, right?
So what's frustrating to me, having a maritime background and understanding the shipping industry, is these ports. If you've ever been around a ship that's hauling and loading and unloading gasoline and tankers
cargo
tankers and cargo ships, the sheer amount of work that has to go into unloading a container ship.
Yep.
Literally tens of thousands of containers per ship, and you're doing 10 or 12 ships a day. It's an incredibly dangerous work.
Yep.
It's fast-paced. There's no breaks, and it keeps the economy going.
Sure.
And so I kind of feel for these folks. They need the health care, they need the pay, and they deserve the pay because what they're doing, and we're going to see it. We're going to see how much they deserve it in the next couple of days because it keeps the economy going.
Well,
but what's frustrating is that these negotiations have been going on for months.
Yeah.
There were so many ways that this could have been avoided, and the administration could have been on top of, and has been informed of it the entire way. We knew a month ago that they were going to strike, right? And there's still the power of the pen. There's a cooling off period through the Taft Act, the Taft-Hartley Act, and 80 days. You would think that the current administration would want to invoke that to get through the election, to earn some. But that, because it was already in place, it was going to happen. The hurricane was insult to injury.
Sure.
They didn't do it on purpose. They did not. They didn't start their protest on the same weekend as a hurricane on purpose, right? It just happens that's going to exacerbate it because the hurricane victims are going to need all of their lumber and supplies from Home Depot, which is getting all of its stuff off of container ships that are going to be sitting in a port.
Well, the thing that I get, I lived in the Baltimore area in Annapolis for a lot of years, and just recently when the bridge was destroyed, right, and the cargo ship, all of those guys were out of work in the port, every one of them, and yet they're out there protesting now, knowing that this is what it was like before. How long is this going to go on before they go back to work?
Well, and think about that. That one port being down for a month was enough to everybody felt it.
Yes.
Right? Now we're talking about all of the ports under the Teamsters
Coast.
Union on the East Coast and through the Gulf.
Yep. So how do you stop that? We get you down there to speak out.
We just need the
Certainly.
administration to be more
Yeah.
responsible about these things when they start happening.
Well,
But they're not paying attention to these things.
And we should invoke the 80-day cool-off period
Yeah.
immediately. Why should we wait one more day? I don't see a reason to wait
And
one
that
more
would
day.
be an October gift to the administration. Hey, you
Yeah.
did something
Yeah.
for the
And maybe-
economy right
yeah.
before the election. Why? So what's the thinking
The
there?
gas has come down in price. I think we should have elections every year because
That's right.
things get done, right? The gas has come down, and now you have this new protest going on. You can bet your life they're going to solve it before the November election. I see that going to happen. And now I'm starting to sound like you, for God's sakes. But what do you think? You know, Russ, when you've done a lot here, you know, you were an executive counselor, a Senate. Were you ever a state rep? Or you just
No, I wanted to be a state rep. I talked to all my reps, and they said no.
don't do it. There's 400
You
of
went
us.
straight to state
No,
senate?
they weren't going to retire, you know?
Oh no, they're there forever.
Yeah, and I
But-
wasn't going to step on their heels.
Yeah, what do you see yourself, what committees would you like to be on? I'm guessing budget committee for one,
But yes, you have to do the job, carry out the law. That's
Yeah.
one thing. Make sure that I have the voice to be able to do that.
Yes.
That's for sure. But during the last 6 years of being in the state Senate, I was chair of commerce, chair of
Right.
energy
Right.
in those 6 years.
So is that what
So
you'd like to do? I mean,
if that's where
if you have
know,
an opportunity
if
to
if
do
it
it.
happens that we have a speaker that I speak to, you know, and they say, "What do you want?" It says, "Well, use me as the best way I can serve my state."
Good.
For sure. And that experience that I have in just those two arenas of that 14 years of public service, 10 years in the state Senate, 4
Right.
years in executive council, sitting right next to Chris Pappas, right
Right.
here. We worked together
Yeah.
to lower our, the amount of opioid deaths we had here in Manchester. We worked hard with Chris Sununu, Chris Pappas, myself. Those days were good for New Hampshire. Recently, of course, because Chris Pappas isn't standing up to the border problem, asking the administration to administer the law. He's not even saying a word about it. We have those opioid deaths spiraling right
Yeah.
back up to where they were.
Yeah.
And that is a problem that's not good for New Hampshire. We need that change. I'll bring the same thing that I did when I was in the executive council, making sure I take care of the needs of our state when I get to Washington, D.C. And what's wonderful about it is, of course, I spoke to my wife of 42 years.
Wow.
And she said, "I will go with you, and I will be right behind
Awesome.
you. I'll be with you side by side."
You need that.
And that trust that's been there between us, I trust her so much, and she trusts me so much. That is what we need to make sure that someone, when they go to Washington, D.C., they don't lose their roots. My roots are right here in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
From Raymond, New Hampshire in 1775, when John Prescott left and went to the Battle of Bunker Hill, I feel as though I've never been a veteran. I've never served in the armed forces. I feel that this is a calling, and I feel that this is what needs to be done at
You've
this
given
moment.
back, and that's really,
Yeah.
we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
I've never been in the military either, but I try to give as much as I can, like you did. So, go ahead, you were going to say something. I was just kind of curious. Tell me, you have a family business too, though, right?
Yes.
Is that still in place,
Yes.
and what is it?
Well, it's based on reputation of my father. Started in 1954. People trusted him for well pumps, water piping, pipe valves and fittings, plumbing supplies. We're a wholesale supplier that my father started that business in Exeter in 1954, and he had a ability to grow that company to over $100,000 in sales in 1980 or so.
Wow.
Per month.
Per month.
Per month. And then when I got there, that was wonderful. We had a $100,000 month. That was amazing. Right now, we did $2.9 million this month in September.
That's awesome.
And we've grown that business. I've worked with my brother for 40 years, from 1984 right to 2020. That's almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And then I purchased the company when he retired. And now my 3 oldest children, they're running the company, the daily operations. I don't hear from them. They're doing a wonderful job. They know what they're doing. My daughter's going to be 40. My son will be 38 and 36. And that will be next year. And they're just an amazing, wonderful people. And serving the people through customer service, quality products. My patents prove that You know, the Patent and Trademark Office looks at your patent application and say, is this really true? Right? And they verify it, and then you receive your patent. You're always doing what's right, promoting the quality of your products, selling yourself.
Yeah.
That's what they do. That's what I did my whole life. And when I got to politics, I didn't start out that way. I started out with the negative campaigning. And I realized shortly after that, negative campaigning can win and negative campaigning can lose.
Yeah.
And I believe that negative campaigning will lose this time because I've learned that winning with dignity, winning with integrity is the only way you can get something accomplished. That's why I've worked so hard to be positive, not to be negative, and make sure that we just talk about the issues,
Yep.
solve our problems, and someone that will go there and be productive. We haven't had much production out of Chris Pappas in these issues, in these areas where I'm speaking about that must be done.
Can you get your product from here, or is this going to affect you? I mean, is this strike affect your business, or
Not
or
as
do you
much
make
for our
products
core
here?
business. Our core business is a lot of American made.
Oh, okay.
But of course, as you know, you can't
Yeah.
go every day without having to buy something
Right.
that's
Right.
imported into the United
Well, so
States.
that's the thing.
it will affect my business, but not the core.
Okay.
I try to buy American as much as I can,
Yep.
and we always have multiple sources, especially coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
We already have multiple sources already set up.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So it's not just going to be imports that are a problem, right? I mean, when I was on the oil tankers, we would go to Texas. We would fill up with super unleaded, you know, on a giant oil tanker, and we would bring that around
Gotcha.
the Florida peninsula, and we would drop it off wherever it was needed: Boston, Rhode Island,
Yep.
Baltimore, and so
All the ports are going to be closed to that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we're doing domestic shipping that's going to be affected by this as well. And so the next thing that's going to happen is fuel prices are going to go up, and the trucking prices are going to go up, and your trucks
Shipping,
are going to start slowing down. So even if you do buy American, you're going to have a trucking problem in a couple of weeks.
And I guess that's why I just called out
So
Chris Pappas.
yeah,
Have this stop. Make that letter. Send it to the president. Enforce the Taft Act, the Taft-Hartley Act, and do that 80 days of cool down. It's so important to all the businesses here in New Hampshire.
Who do you think is running the country, though? I mean, that's kind of a wide open question, but I wonder. I mean, I'm starting to wonder now who's really in charge, because he shows up down the beach, or he'll show up and, you know, say a few words. He won't even take any questions at all, none, zero, which he's been that way almost from the beginning.
and something that's been going on for 2,000 years is the unrest in the Middle East.
Sure.
And he's got one word: don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to be a little more articulate than that if you're the leader of the free world.
So what is, Russ, what would you like the people to hear that you haven't had a chance to really, because I know you have, you know, people ask you questions, but they're the same questions probably over and over again, right?
Yeah.
So what are you hearing when you're out there? What kinds of people, what are the people concerned about? Have we touched on it? I mean, the economy, and what's the order?
Well, the most important thing is when politicians are running for office, they make promises.
Right.
We've had promises made, not promises kept from Chris Pappas.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that everyone speaks to me, gets my opinion, and I'm trying to express them as clearly as I can of those items that we went through.
Yep.
That those are my top priorities. That's where Chris Pappas has let us down. He's been ineffective. We need someone that has been ineffective. I'm pointing to my past. I've been in the state senate. I am a businessman, have 50 employees. I write the paychecks every week.
Right.
And I also do $3 million worth of commerce every single month. I know how to balance budgets.
Yep.
I can get the same thing
So
done
you're
in
talking
Washington,
about
D.C.
future, not just past. I mean,
That's
past is
right.
experience, gives you wisdom, and then you move forward with that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I've always, when I made those promises, we're not going to raise taxes. We are going to be able to cut spending and make sure we balance our budget that way.
Yeah.
That's what we did. I kept my word.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to plan on doing again when I get to Washington.
So we hear constantly, every time you look at any of the ads or anything about abortion, it's a, you know, that's their biggest concern is abortion, when our law here is pretty sound, and there are some more liberal states that they're more constrictive than we are.
Yeah.
And, one of the other people running for office, she will say that she'll follow the law of the state. So, I mean, I guess the question becomes, would you vote for a government abortion law?
On the federal level?
Federal, I'm not,
absolutely not. Again, you swear an oath to the Constitution.
Exactly.
In the Constitution, the 10th Amendment, one of the most important amendments, the Bill of Rights, said that the states have rights. And if they haven't relinquished those rights to the federal government shouldn't take them over. So when Chris Pappas says that he's going to do something to codify Roe v. Wade, it's already codified in New Hampshire. It's already here. And when I say it's not the responsibility of the federal government to have anything to do with that particular law. It's not the job of the executive branch or the legislative branch in the federal government. I will not be touching that. It's a states' rights issue.
Are you getting that question a lot, or are we just hearing it as public?
Not at all.
Not at all.
People already understand. I believe that Jean Shaheen came out a couple of years ago and explained what our law was so that people weren't worried about
so they're just trying to gin this up, basically.
Exactly. And what they need to have is someone that has integrity to say, I can do this. This is what I will do. I'll emphasize on it. That's what I did in the Executive Council. That's what I did in the
you have a track
Senate,
record of that.
And I will do it this time.
Yeah.
So going to the opposite end of that, you got the 10th Amendment that says that states have rights and states can make their own rules. But then you have other amendments, such as the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, which says the states cannot infringe on these two things.
Right. I'm the prime sponsor.
And we have a series. We have laws all over the country that are restricting both. Right. You've got federal agencies going into tech companies and saying, hey, you can't let people say these things out loud. Right? You're infringing on First Amendment speeches. They're going after our First Amendment rights. And then you have states all over the country that infringe on the Second Amendment in various different ways. Right. So how do you feel about the other side, where now the federal government has this codified? We have to get rid of what's going on.
Right. Well, Gun Owners of America has given me an A+ rating. I'm a prime sponsor, back when I was in the state Senate, of our voter ID law. I don't want to go into that one yet, but that's the Second Amendment is the constitutional carry. My constitutional carry, I was the trailblazer for that. It died in the Senate. I mean, it died in the House. And I got it through the Senate. And also, when we talk about the amendment, the 10th Amendment and the states' rights, Chris Pappas voted for removing our ability to run our own elections. I'm the prime sponsor of our voter ID bill. I worked with the State Clerks Association, the city clerks, the town clerks, all of them, to make sure that we had a workable voter ID law that we could implement that very year that we passed the bill. And we did. In fact, my opponent, Donna Schlackman for State Senate, back in Exeter, she said, I came with my ID to vote today, Russell. You did a good job, right? I didn't make a stink, and nobody did. No. They realized that, pass common sense legislation, work with all sides of the issue, and make one small step instead of trying to make these giant steps where they just get taken back, or they
get a little at a time if you can, right?
and allow people to adjust to it and understand that that was a good thing. And then that's why when the not the Biden administration, but the Obama administration reviewed it, the judicial review, it passed. It passed their judicial review. They didn't take any objection to it. And Governor Lynch at the time did not veto it. That's called bipartisanship, making sure that you see all sides. I'll bring that same experience to Washington, D.C.
So just this week, for some reason I can't remember.
And I'm calling out Chris Pappas, please stop trying to take our voting rights away from our state.
Oh, yeah.
The ACLU is suing the state again
let's
for
stop that.
Yeah. So just this week, Congressman, I can't remember his name or where he's from, but introduced at the federal level a federal constitutional carry. So it's been introduced. I doubt it's going anywhere this session.
Probably not.
Do you think you would support that in the next session?
That is exactly, why
did,
the Gun Owners of America give me an A+ rating. We make sure it's constitutional. That's for sure. Make sure whatever we work on down in the federal government, we don't take rights from our states.
Sure.
But if it's an opportunity to do the right thing on a federal level, I'll be there.
Okay. And how about term limits for Congress?
I was the first one in this race for the 1st congressional district here in New Hampshire. I was the first person to sign the pledge for 6 years as a House rep is a term limit, and I signed the pledge, and then I will vote for that every single time.
Yeah, I find that really a tough one because we talked about that a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
those
we
people
want it, but we don't necessarily agree on what the actual terms should be. Like we should still have that discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was.
And I will work on it.
It was that the people that have to vote on that law are those that have been there the longest, right?
Right.
In Congress and in the Senate, they've been there the longest. That happens.
And I volunteer to be the shortest, so that we can get over the hurdle.
So it would be different things, though, I think, for the senators, maybe 2 terms or something, or rather than 1 term. And like you said, maybe 3 to 4 terms for Congress.
I don't want a Congress full of freshmen.
Right.
And
you need some.
And we do need experienced people, right?
Okay.
So, but we don't need people who have been there for 40 years and have completely destroyed. I mean, you've got folks in Congress that were there in the 70s, right? Or we're still, there's still some folks in there in the 90s. And some of these failed policies that were enacted during the Carter administration, and they're just hanging on real tight to those things. So, and we've seen these things go down, and they're hanging on, and there's money involved. It's got to stop. So, but it doesn't mean that I don't want experienced legislators. I just think we all agree that 30, 40 years is way too long to be in power and to be disillusioned. So,
yeah, do you think, Russ, that money will make the difference in the elections? In other words, because it's always been that way. Now, the state reps have to raise like $10,000 or $15,000. It's $100,000 for Senate now in the state. So is that, is it because they get more airtime and money will make the difference there? But you're all over the state, so.
Right. We need more. My grassroots, I can only do so much to reach so many people.
Sure.
So I'm doing all I can to do venues like this. But you need to be able to spend money to be able to get your message out. And that will be a positive message that will come out of my campaign.
Yeah. And it's got to be a little tough with Pappas because he's got money there from each election, and so he's probably got a fair amount of money.
A series of PACs that are putting out the attack ads and
but you know what?
Kind of
people are sick of those. I know I am. I've been in politics like 20 years now, but I'm sick of seeing those. My favorite ad right now is the one that Kelly Ayotte has with Joe, her husband. It's hysterical. I can't wait for it to come on. They tease each other. It was just a breath of fresh air to see that, to make her look human, just like you've done in your
all of my mailers were a positive mailer during the primary, and I believe that's the only way that you can make a difference, is not to antagonize the other side, just talk about the issues, ask them to make changes, and then people need to know where you stand and if you're able to back it up.
So I absolutely agree with that, but at the same time, you can't stop the other side from running the negative ads running the attack ads.
Can't stop that.
And the way the world works right now is you've got half the population has an attention span of about 35 seconds watching TikToks and just seeing a headline, seeing a soundbite, right, or hearing a soundbite. And that's what the other side counts on. They count on being able to say, okay, during the debate last night, you get a CBS commentator, or what do you call him? The debate moderator. Fact checks J.D. Vance and says something that is a complete lie, and then he tried to, and then is reversed later. But The fact is, they said it out loud, the population heard it, and that's what they heard and that's what they believe. And the same thing goes with these mailers and the attack ads. Right. And I feel like you have to respond to some of it. How do you respond? You have to be able to, you don't want to go negative, but you have to respond and say, that's a lie, and here's what really happened. How do you respond to the negative?
I responded to it tonight.
Yeah.
You know, you asked me about the abortion issue. This bill, this law that we have in New Hampshire is less restrictive than California.
Yep.
And also, our 10th Amendment restricts me, when I take the oath of office, to uphold and defend the Constitution, restricts me from tampering with the rights of our state to have their own law concerning abortion.
That's a very good way of putting it, and that's exactly how papists should be doing it, is saying, I took an oath, right? The 10th Amendment is part of my oath.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Well, I would, I wish you a lot of luck with this. I want to see, we need people like you there. We've gone so long without having any representation like yourself and some of the other people that have lost over the years.
Well, our congressional delegates.
We've never,
It's been a long time.
Well, let me put it out there right now. For 10 years in the state Senate and 4 years on the executive council, I always had my personal cell phone on the website, and I'm giving it out right now. My personal cell phone is 603-231-7822. Again, it's 603-231-7822. Go to my website, Prescott for Congress, and just review all of the endorsements that I have from all over the state, from Al Baldessaro, who definitely is right behind President Trump to win. So am I. Then you go to the other side of the Republican Party, to the moderate side. I have plenty of people that just fill out the whole party, and then the independents are undecided, right?
Yeah.
The only way that I was able to win against Maggie Hassan, or win in 2018 when we lost the House and the Senate, I won the executive council seat. The only way that happens is because I have the trust of the independent voter. When they do investigate, I gave you my phone number, 603-231-7822. Go to prescottforcongress.com. When you investigate, I hope you see that I have the credibility in my business background, in my my family background, but also in the years that I spent in public service. And I really mean what I say. I am going to go down there to work very hard in the appropriations subcommittees to make sure we take care of our needs of our country and balance our budget, get it closer and closer every year to being balanced. Right now, it's getting farther and farther away. And every $1 trillion that we spend that we don't have is more debt that our grandchildren are going to have to pay themselves. And I have 8 great-grandchildren. I'm not great-grandchildren, they're great, but I have 8 grandchildren, including my 5 children, all married, have children, except one pair don't. So I'm going down there, I'm taking my roots with me, I'm not leaving New Hampshire. They will always be tied to here.
All right. We're coming up on time, so let our viewers know how they can get in touch with you, your website, all of those things. You've obviously given out your cell phone number, so.
Yeah.
and just look at that little camera
anything
there.
else that you, a message that you want to get out.
Yeah,
so.
I would. I have operated as a person of integrity my whole life. I'm a professional engineer for 30 years, licensed by the state of New Hampshire. I have never had an infraction. For 40 years, I've been in business, making sure I take care of 50 employees. I pay 100% of health care for all of my employees. Wow. We also have a profit sharing in our company. This background that I have of making sure my company is sound stems from my brother mentoring me and my father mentoring me. Also, I took that information, to all that experience, to the state Senate, and made sure we didn't have an income tax, made sure we didn't have a sales tax, made sure that we eliminated the tax on inheritance. We don't have an inheritance tax because that's one of the first things I did when I got to Concord. We need to be able to cut spending so we can lower taxes. This is what we need to do in Washington, D.C. It's what we did here in the state of New Hampshire. We are now one of the safest, or the safest in the country, state in the country, and we're also one of that is the freest in the state, of the states in the country. We need to bring that same live free or die mentality and hard work down to Washington, D.C. Stand up for the Constitution and the oath of office. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank
Appreciate
you, Russ.
you being on.
And good luck in November.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll see you get elected. And
We'll have you
when
back.
when you come back for a visit, you come and tell us what's going on down there.
All right.
All right?
I'll try my hardest to do the right thing every single day.
All right. All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Russ.
All right. Club meeting 1732 Lakeshore Road in 5 minutes. We'll see you next week.